The penthouse was worth $12 million, but Grace Brown wasn't thinking about the commission when Kang Ji-hoon's hand wrapped around her wrist. She was thinking about how a man who hadn't touched another human being in 5 years was now pulling her so close she could feel his heartbeat thundering against her chest. His fingers trembled. His jaw clenched. And when he whispered her name like a prayer and a curse all at once, she knew everything was about to change. "Don't let go," he breathed, his voice breaking in a way that made her forget every rule she'd ever learned about keeping distance from clients. But this story doesn't start here. It starts 3 weeks earlier, when Grace Brown made the biggest mistake of her career, and it led her straight into the arms of Seoul's most dangerous man. Welcome to Afro-Korean Love Stories. If this story has got you hooked like it should, hit that like button and subscribe, because things are about to get intense. Tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I'd really love to know. Now, let's dive into it. Grace had been in Seoul for exactly 8 months when she landed the Hanamdong listing. The luxury penthouse had been sitting empty for 2 years, and every realtor in the city had tried and failed to move it. Too expensive, they said. Too exclusive. The owner was impossible to reach. But Grace didn't get on a plane from Atlanta to play it safe. She'd left behind a comfortable job, a comfortable life, and a man who'd wanted to make her comfortable forever. She came to Korea because she wanted more. She wanted to prove she could build something extraordinary on her own terms. The penthouse was her shot. She spent 3 days preparing, studied the market, memorized every detail of the property, practiced her pitch in Korean until her accent was almost passable. When her phone rang at 11 p.m. on a Thursday, she didn't recognize the number. "Miss Brown." The voice was smooth, controlled, speaking perfect English. "I understand you represent the Hanam property. I'd like to view it tomorrow morning. 6 a.m. 6 in the morning was insane for a showing, but Grace knew opportunity when she heard it. "Of course. May I have your name?" There was a pause. Long enough that she wondered if the line had dropped. "Kang." That's all you need to know. She should have researched him. Should have asked her colleagues about any Kang family in Seoul's luxury market. But Grace was too excited, too focused on closing what could be her biggest deal yet. She arrived at the penthouse at 5:30, made sure everything was perfect, and waited. When the elevator doors opened at exactly 6 a.m., 3 men in black suits stepped out first. They swept the apartment with the efficiency of people who'd done this 1,000 times. Grace's stomach tightened. Then he walked in. Kang Ji-hoon was not what she expected. He was younger, maybe 35, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to calculate everything in a single glance. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her rent, and he moved through space like he owned it, which she supposed he was about to. "Mr. Kang." She extended her hand, smile bright and professional. "Grace Brown. Thank you for coming." He looked at her hand like it was a weapon. Didn't take it. Didn't smile back. Just walked past her into the living room, his men flanking him like shadows. Grace dropped her hand, swallowed her embarrassment, and followed. "Professional. Stay professional." The property features floor-to-ceiling windows with panoramic views of the Han River, she began, falling into her rehearsed pitch. 4 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, a private elevator, and a security system that's virtually impenetrable. He wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at her. "You're American," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir. From Atlanta. I've been in Seoul for 8 months, specializing in luxury properties for international clients." "You're very far from home." Something in his tone made her spine straighten. "I go where the opportunity is." For the first time, his expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but close. "So do I." He walked through the apartment in silence, Grace trailing behind, her usual sales patter dying in her throat. This man didn't need to be sold. He was studying the space like he was planning something. When they reached the master bedroom, he finally stopped at the window. "Do you know who I am, Miss Brown?" The question made her heart skip. A potential buyer? Now he did smile, and it was devastating. "Your honesty is refreshing. Most people in this city know exactly who I am before I walk into a room." Grace's phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from her colleague, Min Seo. 3 words that made her blood run cold. "Get out now." She glanced at the message, then back at Ji-hoon. whose smile had faded into something unreadable. "Is everything all right?" he asked, and the concern in his voice felt genuine, which only confused her more. Grace's mind raced. The security detail, the early morning meeting, the way everyone seemed to move around him like he was untouchable. "I need to take this call," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Of course." She stepped into the hallway, hands shaking as she dialed Minesio. Her colleague answered on the first ring. "Grace, please tell me you're not still there." "What's going on?" "Kong Ji-hoon. He's not just wealthy, Grace. He runs half the underground in Gangnam. His family controls everything from clubs to construction. People don't say no to him, because people who say no end up disappearing." Grace's stomach dropped. "You're joking." "I wish I was."
"Get out of there. Politely. Carefully."
"And never contact him again." She hung up, pressing her palm against the cool wall to steady herself. Through the doorway, she could see Ji-hoon still standing at the window, hands in his pockets, completely still. A dangerous man. That's what Minesio was telling her. But he'd asked if she was all right. He'd smiled at her honesty. Grace had built her career on reading people, and nothing about him screamed danger. At least not the kind Minesio was warning her about. She walked back in, decision made. "Mr. Kong, I apologize, but I have another appointment I'd forgotten about." He turned, studied her face. "You're lying." The bluntness startled her. "Excuse me? Someone told you who I am." He took a step closer. Not threatening, just observant. "And now you're afraid." Grace lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly. "I'm not afraid. I'm being professional. If you're interested in the property, I can send you the complete information packet and we can schedule another viewing." "You are afraid," he said softly, "but you're hiding it well. That's impressive." "I don't know what you want me to say." "The truth." He moved closer again, and Grace forced herself not to step back. "Do you think I'm dangerous, Miss Brown?" Every instinct screamed yes. But something else, something she couldn't name, made her answer differently. "I think you're a man who's used to people being afraid of him. And I think that probably gets very lonely." The words hung in the air between them. Ji-hoon's expression shifted, something flickering behind his eyes that looked almost like surprise. Like pain. His guards tensed, hands moving toward weapons Grace suddenly realized they were carrying. But Ji-hoon raised one hand, a subtle gesture that froze them in place. "Leave us," he said quietly. "Sir, protocol. I said leave us." The command in his voice was absolute. The men exchanged glances, then filed out without another word. The elevator doors closed. And Grace was alone with him. "You should be afraid," Ji-hoon said, but his voice had lost its edge. "Everyone else is." "Maybe I'm not everyone else."
"No."
He looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You're definitely not." The moment stretched. Grace knew she should leave, should run, should do exactly what Minesio told her. Instead, she heard herself ask, "Are you actually interested in buying this property?"
"No."
The honesty surprised her. "Then why are you here?" Ji-hoon walked to the window again, and this time Grace followed, stopping beside him. The morning sun was turning the Han River gold. 5 years ago, I stopped touching people," he said, his voice so quiet she almost didn't hear it. "No handshakes. No casual contact. Nothing." Grace waited, sensing he needed the silence to continue. "Someone I trusted used that closeness to put a knife in my brother's back." Literally. His jaw tightened. "I decided then that distance was safer. For everyone." "I'm sorry," Grace said, meaning it. "Why are you telling me this?" He turned to look at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes took her breath away. "Because when you offered your hand earlier, I wanted to take it. For the first time in 5 years, I wanted to touch another human being." Grace's heart pounded. "That terrifies me," he continued. "You terrify me, Grace Brown." The way he said her name made something in her chest tighten. "I'm just a realtor." "No," he said again. "You're not." His phone rang, shattering the moment. Ji-hoon answered in rapid Korean, his expression hardening back into the mask she'd first seen. When he hung up, the vulnerable man was gone. "I have business to attend to," he said formally. "Thank you for your time." Before we continue, I need to know, are you Team Grace or Team Runaway? Drop a comment and let me know if you think she should have researched him first or if walking in blind was actually the perfect move. And while you're at it, tell me what you think happens when his guards leave them alone. Hit that like button if you're already hooked, because trust me, this story is about to get even more intense. He was halfway to the elevator when Grace called out, "Wait." Ji-hoon stopped but didn't turn around. "If you ever want to see the property again," she said, surprising herself with her boldness, "or if you just want someone who isn't afraid to shake your hand, you have my number." He looked back over his shoulder, and for a moment, that devastating, almost smile returned. "Dangerous offer, Miss Brown. Maybe I'm done playing it safe." The elevator doors closed behind him, and Grace stood alone in the empty penthouse, wondering what she'd just started. For 3 days, nothing. Grace threw herself into work, trying to forget the way Ji-hoon had looked at her, the way his voice had cracked when he talked about wanting to touch her hand. Min Seo avoided her. Her other colleagues whispered when she walked by. Apparently word had spread that she'd met with Kang Ji-hoon privately, that she'd survived. On the 4th day, flowers arrived at her office. Not a bouquet, an entire garden's worth. White orchids, dozens of them, filling her small desk space with their delicate scent. The card was simple. Dinner. Tonight. 8 p.m. If you're still not afraid. JH. Grace stared at the card for a full minute. This was insane. She barely knew him. He was dangerous. His world was violence and power, and everything she'd come to Korea to escape. Her phone buzzed. "Min Seo. Please tell me those flowers aren't from who I think they're from." "I can't tell you that," Grace replied, "because it would be a lie." "Grace, no. Whatever you're thinking, no." "I'm thinking about dinner." "Are you insane? Do you know what his family does to people who get too close? His mother runs that family like a dynasty. She's already buried 3 women who tried to get near her sons." Grace's hand tightened on her phone. He lost his brother, Min Seo. Someone he trusted killed his brother. Can you imagine living with that? Can you imagine dying because you felt sorry for a mafia boss? The line went quiet. "Just be careful," Min Seo finally said, her voice softer. "Please. I don't want to lose you." Grace looked at the orchids, at the card, at the address he'd written on the back. "I'll be careful," she promised, knowing it was probably a lie. The restaurant was in Itaewon, tucked away on a street Grace had never noticed before. No sign, just a red door with a single camera above it. She'd changed outfits 4 times, finally settling on a black dress that was elegant without trying too hard. When she knocked, the door opened immediately. The same guards from the penthouse. They led her through a hallway lined with private rooms, each door closed, muffling conversations in multiple languages. The last door opened into a room that took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city lights. A single table set for 2. And Ji-hoon, standing by the window in a dark blue suit, looking at her like she was the only person in the world. "You came," he said, and she heard the surprise in his voice. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I hoped you would. I didn't expect it." He moved toward her, then stopped, maintaining that careful distance. "Thank you for the flowers," Grace said. "They're beautiful. I wasn't sure what you'd like." White orchids mean purity in Korea. Seemed appropriate. Why appropriate? Ji-hoon's smile was sad. "Because you're the first pure thing I've encountered in a very long time." They sat. Dinner arrived in courses, each more exquisite than the last, but Grace barely tasted any of it. She was too focused on him, on the way he spoke about Seoul like he both loved and hated it, on the careful way he never let his hands get too close to hers across the table. "Tell me about Atlanta," he said during the 4th course. "Tell me what made you leave." So Grace told him. About the architecture firm where she'd started, about the partner who'd wanted her to be his trophy instead of his equal, about the moment she'd realized she was shrinking herself to fit into someone else's vision of her life. "So you ran," Ji-hoon said. "I prefer to think of it as strategic relocation." "I ran too," he said quietly. "After my brother died. I wanted to leave Seoul, leave Korea, leave everything behind. But my mother reminded me that running only works if you have somewhere to run to. And men like me, we don't get somewhere else." "What do you mean, men like you?" Men with blood on their hands. The words hung heavy. Grace should have been terrified. Should have made an excuse and left. Instead, she reached across the table and placed her hand palm up between them. An offering. An invitation. Jihoon stared at her hand like it was a miracle and a trap. Grace, you don't understand what you're asking. Then explain it to me. If I touch you, his voice was raw, I won't want to stop. And my world destroys everything I care about. Grace didn't pull her hand back. What if I'm not as easy to destroy as you think? Jihoon's eyes darkened. Slowly, like a man approaching salvation or damnation, he reached out. His fingertips brushed her palm, and Grace watched his entire body shudder. 5 years. 5 years since he'd touched another person, and she could see what it cost him to break that rule now. His hand enveloped hers, warm and trembling, and when his thumb traced circles on her wrist, she heard him exhale like he'd been holding his breath for half a decade. Grace, he whispered her name like a confession. I need you to understand something. My family won't accept this. You're an outsider. You're not Korean. You have no ties to our world. Is that what you're worried about? Your family's approval. I'm worried about your safety. He gripped her hand tighter. My mother is already asking questions about the American realtor I met with privately. She has people watching me constantly. If she thinks you're a weakness, I'm not a weakness, Grace interrupted. I'm a choice. Your choice. Jihoon stood abruptly, still holding her hand, pulling her up with him. They were close now, closer than they'd been in the penthouse. You have no idea what you're choosing, he said, but he didn't let go. Then show me. Something broke in his expression. The control he'd maintained all evening shattered, and suddenly his free hand was cupping her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with a reverence that made her breath catch. If I start this, he said, his voice hoarse, I won't be able to walk away. Grace leaned into his touch.
Good.
Because I don't want you to. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like Grace expected. It wasn't aggressive or demanding. It was desperate, hungry, like a man drowning finally breaking the surface for air. His hands trembled as they moved to her waist, pulling her closer, and when she wrapped her arms around his neck, she felt him make a sound that was half groan, half relief. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jihoon pressed his forehead to hers. I'm going to ruin your life, he whispered. Promise. Grace laughed despite everything. Confident, aren't you? Realistic. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. My mother will summon you within the week. She'll try to buy you off, threaten you, maybe both. My enemies will see you as a target, and the people who love me will hate you for making me vulnerable again. Is this your idea of pillow talk? Because it needs work. Jihoon smiled, a real smile this time, and it transformed his entire face. I'm trying to give you an out, Grace Brown. One last chance to walk away before this gets complicated. I moved to Korea alone to chase a dream everyone said was impossible. I think I can handle complicated. His smile faded into something more serious. I haven't been with anyone in 5 years. Haven't wanted to be. But you, he cupped her face again. You make me want things I thought I'd buried with my brother. The vulnerability in his admission made Grace's chest ache. Then stop trying to push me away. I'm trying to protect you. I don't need protection. I need honesty. Can you give me that? Jihoon studied her for a long moment, and Grace could see the war happening behind his eyes. Finally, he nodded. My brother's name was Jaesung. He was younger than me by 2 years, and he was everything I wasn't.
Kind.
Open. He believed people were fundamentally good. His voice roughened. The woman he loved used that against him. She was planted by a rival family. For 3 months, she played the part perfectly. And then one night, she put a knife in his back while he slept. Grace's hand found his chest, feeling his heartbeat racing. I found him, Jihoon continued. Held him while he died. He kept apologizing. Said he was sorry for trusting her, sorry for being weak, sorry for leaving me alone. A muscle ticked in his jaw. I swore I'd never let anyone close enough to hurt me like that again. And then you walked into that penthouse with your terrible Korean pronunciation and your refusal to be intimidated, and he broke off, shaking his head. You what? Grace pressed. I wanted to trust again. For the first time in 5 years, standing next to you at that window, I wanted to believe that maybe not everyone is a threat. He caught her hand against his chest, holding it there. Do you understand how terrifying that is for me? If you're still watching, drop a comment telling me if you think Grace should trust Ji-hoon or run. And what do you think his mother will do when she finds out? Let me know below. Grace looked up at him, at the fear and hope warring in his eyes, and made her decision. I understand. But Ji-hoon, I'm not her. I'm not whoever hurt your brother. I'm just a woman from Atlanta who's terrible at playing it safe and apparently has a thing for complicated Korean men who haven't touched anyone in 5 years. Despite everything, he laughed. The sound was rusty, like he didn't do it often, and it made Grace want to hear it again. Just so we're clear, she continued. I'm choosing this. Choosing you. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Together, he repeated, like he was testing the word. I haven't had it together in a long time. They spent that night at his hidden house in Pyeongchang-dong, a sanctuary he'd never shared with anyone. Grace woke wrapped in his arms, his steady breathing against her neck, and for a moment everything felt perfect. Then his phone rang. Ji-hoon's entire body tensed as he looked at the screen. It's my mother. He answered in Korean, his voice carefully neutral. Grace watched his expression shift from guarded to resigned. When he hung up, he pulled her closer. She wants to meet you. Tonight. That was fast. She has people everywhere. She knew about us before we even left the restaurant. He tilted her chin up. Grace, you can still walk away. Once you meet her, once you enter that world, there's no clean exit. Grace kissed him softly. I'm not looking for an exit. The call came to Grace's phone 2 hours later. A woman's voice, cold and precise. Miss Brown. This is Kang Yoon-hee. My driver will collect you at 7:30. Don't be late. The line went dead before Grace could respond. Ji-hoon wanted to go with her, but Grace refused. She's testing me, Grace said firmly. If I show up with you, I've already failed. My mother is brilliant and ruthless. She'll try to buy you first. When that doesn't work, she'll threaten everything you love. He gripped her shoulders. Grace, she plays for keeps. So do I. The estate was 40 minutes outside Seoul, more fortress than home. Grace was led through marble hallways to a private dining room where Kang Yoon-hee waited. She was elegant in a deep blue hanbok, smaller than Grace expected, with eyes that calculated everything. Miss Brown. Sit. Grace sat, keeping her spine straight. Thank you for inviting me, Mrs. Kang. Let's be direct. You're sleeping with my son. You've made him break a vow he kept for 5 years. I want to understand why a smart woman would pursue something so obviously dangerous. Grace met her gaze steadily. Because he asked me to. Because for the first time in 5 years, your son wanted to feel something other than pain. Something flickered across Yoon-hee's face. My youngest son fell in love with the wrong woman. She put a knife in his back while he slept. I held his hand while he died. Her voice never wavered, but Grace heard the grief underneath. I warned him about her. He ignored me because he was in love. I will not watch another son destroyed by misplaced trust. I'm not her, Grace said quietly. So, she claimed too. Yoon-hee poured tea with practiced grace. I'm offering you $10 million to leave Korea tonight. Never contact Ji-hoon again. You'll be wealthy beyond your dreams. Grace had expected this. The number still made her dizzy. And if I refuse? Then I'll ensure your visa is revoked, your clients disappear, and your family in Atlanta begins experiencing unfortunate difficulties. Your mother's small business, your sister's custody case, your nephew's scholarship, all of it gone. The threat hung in the air like poison. Grace's hands trembled, but she didn't look away. May I ask you something, Mrs. Kang? Speak. Do you want your son to be happy, or just safe? Yoon-hee's eyes narrowed dangerously. Safety ensures survival. Happiness is a luxury that got my youngest son killed. Your son is already dead inside, Grace said, her voice stronger now. He's been a ghost for 5 years. You protected him from feeling pain, but you also protected him from feeling anything at all. Is that really what you want? A son who survives but never lives? The silence stretched. Yoonhee's expression remained unreadable. You're either very brave or very foolish, Miss Brown. I'm stubborn, Grace corrected. Your son warned me you were ruthless. I imagine he warned you I don't scare easily. He did. Yoonhee studied her like a puzzle. The money is still available. $10 million. You could build whatever life you want anywhere in the world. Grace stood, decision made. Keep your money, Mrs. Kong. I'm not leaving your son. Not for 10 million. Not for threats. Not for anything. For a long moment, neither woman moved. Then Yoonhee's expression shifted, just slightly. Not warmth, but something close to respect. Sit down, Miss Brown. Grace sat. If you'd taken the money, you'd already be on a plane, Yoonhee said quietly. Anyone who can be bought that easily isn't strong enough for what's coming. My world will test you in ways you cannot imagine. Ji-hoon's enemies will see you as a weakness to exploit. There will be people who try to use you against him, who'll threaten you to control him. I understand the risks. Do you? Yoonhee leaned forward. Because I need to know that when those threats come, when someone puts a gun to your head or a knife to your throat, you won't break. I need to know you won't become the weapon that destroys my last surviving son. Grace's heart pounded, but her voice stayed steady. I won't break. And I won't let anyone use me to hurt him. Yoonhee studied her for another long moment, then nodded once. We'll see. Consider this dinner your first test. You passed. Barely. She stood, signaling the meeting was over. But understand this, Miss Brown. I'm watching you. One mistake, one moment of weakness, and I will remove you from his life. Permanently. Grace stood as well. I wouldn't expect anything less from a mother protecting her son. Something almost like approval crossed Yoonhee's face. My driver will take you back to the city. Tell Ji-hoon I'll see him for Sunday dinner. And Miss Brown, bring something nice to wear. If you're going to be seen with my son, you need to look the part. It wasn't acceptance. Not quite. But it wasn't rejection either. Grace left the estate with her heart racing and her hands shaking, but she'd survived. She'd looked Kang Yoonhee in the eyes and refused to blink. Ji-hoon was waiting at his house when she arrived, pacing like a caged animal. The moment he saw her, he pulled her into his arms. Are you okay? What did she say? Did she threaten you? Yes to all of the above, Grace said, breathing in assent. But I'm still here. He pulled back to look at her face, searching for damage. Grace, your mother invited us to Sunday dinner, she interrupted. She told me to dress nicely. Ji-hoon's eyes widened. She what? I think that means I passed. Barely, but I passed. He kissed her then, deep and desperate and full of relief. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. You're insane. You know that. You're the one who hasn't touched anyone in 5 years and then decided I was worth breaking every rule for. Grace smiled. I think we're both a little insane. Together insane, he murmured. I like the sound of that. 3 months later, Grace stood in that same penthouse where they'd first met, watching Ji-hoon sign the purchase papers. You're actually buying it, she said. I told you I would. He pulled her close, no hesitation, no distance. This is where it started. Where you made me want to feel again. He kissed her softly. Where you pulled me closer when everyone else kept their distance. Grace looked out at the Han River, at the city she'd claimed as her own, at the man who'd chosen to trust again despite every reason not to. It wasn't easy. Yoonhee still tested her constantly. Ji-hoon's world was dangerous and complicated. But standing there in his arms, Grace knew she'd made the right choice. Sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't falling. It's having the courage to let someone catch you. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and check out our next story. Drop a comment telling me what you think happens next for Grace and Ji-hoon. Does his mother ever truly accept her? Can love survive in a world built on power and violence? Let me know your thoughts below. Until next time, this is Afro-Korean Love Stories, reminding you that sometimes the greatest risk brings the greatest reward.